Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Brian if you're new around here, but if you're a returning subscriber, welcome back and thank you so much for checking out today's video. As a note, if you guys have not seen, I have recently retired from Final Fantasy XIV, and as a part of my retirement package, I'm finishing up the last of the Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker controller guides. To make this easy for you guys, if you actually go and look in the description of these videos, you will be able to find my user macros in which that you can actually just right click, hit execute if you paste these into your macros, and it will automatically configure your hotbar just like you see it here. Then you can go forward and customize it to your heart's extent. And the best news is this works if you're a level 1 player or if you're a level 90 player. So that way you can hopefully make this video a little bit easier. But as a part of it, we'll still walk you through kind of my logic, my thought process, how I've got this all set up and configured, and hopefully to make this an enjoyable experience for you. Thank you guys so much for the years of support and encouragement as a Final Fantasy XIV creator, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts and your questions and hearing about your journeys from here on out. But just note, you won't be seeing additional Final Fantasy XIV guides from me on this channel in the near future, so if you guys do hit subscribe for Final Fantasy XIV content, note there will probably be a little bit of a lack of it in the future. So just as a note, thank you so much. But now let's go ahead and officially dive into the core of the guide and get you started playing the Machinist on a controller. Final Fantasy XIV has the best controller support, hands down, than any other MMORPG out there on the market. And one of the reasons is because it works so well with both keyboard and mouse and controller. Now, if you've never configured the controller before, if you're brand new and you're thinking about trying it, the first part of this guide is really going to be for you. You can skip this chapter and move on to the next if you already know everything that I'm about to show you. But under system configuration, you have a controller setting. You might want to enable the device, and if you end up having multiple controllers set up for your computer, you'll see them listed here. Sometimes I have my PS5 controller hooked up, and then essentially I can kind of pick and choose. If you ever want to calibrate your controller, you can do so here, or you can go into button configuration. Now, personally speaking, this is my button configuration, namely that I have my right R3 button as execute macro 99. This is my movement macro, and that's also going to be in the description of this video. I also switch up my jump and my map menu subcommands button accordingly, namely because that's just something more comfortable for me, but just note that that is one additional change that I have made personally, and you guys can play around with this tool as much as you want. Now, the rest of the controller configuration actually comes in system character config, and then you can see control settings. The game allows you to use keyboard and mouse and controller simultaneously, but if you want to have a custom UI that switches easily between the two, you can do so. So if I actually switch to keyboard and mouse, you can see my whole UI and perspective has changed, so it's really quite strong. Now, I like to use legacy type. This is camera-based movement, but I would recommend play around with both. See what actually works the best for you. Now, under the target, they've added some new abilities in Endwalker, auto target according to priority, and enable full auto target. You can choose line of sight or closest range. This means any ability that does require a target, if you have this turned on, it will pick a target for you. And as a controller player, this is very nice. It's very handy. It's very comforting. And it was always annoying when you were trying to fire off an ability, realizing that the enemy that you had selected died, and that you needed to target somebody else and ended up just wasting a button click. So that's actually very convenient. And then also under filters, this is a great tool that gives you the power to really kind of customize how your characters interact and engage with the different items and enemies on screen. You'll notice I have party members turned off in both cases because up and down on the D-pad without any the right trigger, left trigger, active, acts as a just a party list selector. So you already have select parties built into the D-pad by default via up and down, where then left and right is essentially what this is looking at. So left and right on the D-pad is your targeting. So when my weapon is out, I only want to focus in on enemies, and when my weapon's away, here's the items that I want to focus in on. If you want additional filtering, you can enable this by holding down the L bumper or L1 and then any of the face buttons, and it will actually build out a custom filter for you. How this works in game, my weapon is not out, so essentially I have now my extra special filter, but there's nothing around me to kind of highlight that. But if my weapon was out, it would only pick on the anything that's targetable and fightable, and that actually helps out a lot. Now, the other great tricks about this is that holding down the left trigger or the right trigger, the bumpers also do the same thing. They act as a tab target for you, so you can keep moving, and then you can easily swap between different targets by using the left bumper and right bumper when your left trigger and right trigger is held down. And this is great in big pulls. This is really convenient, especially if you end up having like something like a Steam Deck, or you end up having like a controller that has back paddles. That actually makes it very convenient and easy to target with very comfortably. So just kind of maybe consider that if you're having some hand dexterity issues. Then under hotbar settings, I have display hotbar numbers turned off. I also have hide on the side slots turned off. These are great settings that if I turn them on, you all of a sudden see all these little kind of gray floating bars out there. I don't like that. I like to keep it a little bit cleaner. Under sharing, this means that any class and job where it's checked will have the same abilities. This is great for like different potions or different hotbars, like mounts, or if you can see up here, I have a bunch of different items that are the same, like books and my ready check and things like that. So there's any kind of tool that you use across all of your classes and jobs, those want to be checked. You'll see here for the crosshotbar, which is primarily controller driven, the only ones that I have shared are 7 and 8. Then under the cross set bar here, I've got hold mode. You can switch to toggle or mixed, and if you're having hand dexterity issues, I'd recommend you try out these. You will lose out some features like the expanded cross hotbar and the double cross hotbar on the double tap, but it's more important that you have a comfortable time playing the game. I also have it set to always display the W cross hotbar and return to cross hotbar after W cross hotbar input. What that ends up looking like is that if I want to use an ability up here, it will automatically return me back to my base area whenever I am done using said ability. Now, I've engaged in a combat. Let me go ahead and get that exited out. So I'm going to reset that distance, and let's get back into character config. And so note that is hold, and that is the expanded crossbar. You can adjust the input timer for the double tap if you're also struggling with that as well. Then under custom, I have enable the expanded controls with left trigger and right trigger and left trigger. This is where you link it to a specific hotbar. If you aren't aware, you hold down right bumper and then all of a sudden you have access to 8 different hotbars all at once. Now I have it so that it does not tab outside of when my weapon is sheathed, and when my weapon is put away, I can tab to 7 and 8 by just tapping on that right bumper or R1 button, but then you can always hold down and press any of the buttons to get to any of the extra hotbars if you need. For the expanded cross hotbar, that's set to 3 left and 3 right, and the importance of this ends up being is that if you try to interact and drag and drop things onto here, it's not going to work because this is just kind of a window into whatever ends up being linked. So if you want to drag that, drop that here, all of a sudden you see how that actually functions. If you want to make any changes to it, you have to work with the actual linked set. It does not work in any other capacity, at least at the time of this recording. So those are the settings, and that is essentially kind of one that points you to. There's a lot of different things here that this guide doesn't cover, and if you're looking for more details over like everything the controller can and cannot do, be sure to check out my ultimate and complete controller guides, as they're a really great way of giving you that extra information without making these videos overly long. All right, so now let's go ahead and walk you through how I have the macros set up, how I have my controller laid out. We're going to go from left all the way over to the right hand side, and then we'll review the expanded. But just note that over here on the left hand side, kicking it off with foot graze, that is a cross roll ability. I've got the limit break right here, and I have a Tincture of Dexterity, which I'm currently out of at this time. This is a really good opportunity for you to use these different kind of potions to help boost up your damage windows for those different abilities. Now I have Dismantle. This is a great ability dealing basically reducing the target damage dealt by 10%. It is on a 120-second cooldown, so you're not going to be using that much, but it's important to note as it's a great way, especially of providing extra value to your team. Then I've got Chainsaw. This delivers an attack with all enemies in a straight line before you with a potency of 600 of the first and 65% less for all remaining enemies. It will also increase your battery gauge, followed by Flamethrower, and then Bioblaster. And chances are I'm probably just going to read the new abilities to you. I would recommend, just as a pro tip for any kind of game, especially this one, read your abilities and then also go use YouTube. There's a lot of great guide makers who are going to walk you through some of the best rotations and the best understandings of when these windows come up for you to maximize your damage. This guide's not going to go into that detail, but just note, pay attention to your tooltips. That is the best way as a player, especially getting starting out, to help kind of alleviate some of that. And then any gap that you have, reading and listening to a guide ends up for me helps me out immensely because I can help fill in the gap that my brain misses due to my dyslexia and my reading comprehension just not being necessarily the best in the world. But Reassemble is here on the left hand side for the up position. Then I have Wildfire and then Hypercharge followed by Ricochet. That kind of gives me a nice little D-pad window, especially in terms of kind of my AoE rotations. But we'll talk about how I usually kind of think of AoEs on the left hand side and single target on the right hand side, but it is in a 1-to-1 specific rule. Down here at the bottom, I got Scattershot, then auto crossbow, which builds off a Hypercharge. I have Gauss Round and Heat Blast. Now these are kind of single target abilities, and these are more AoE abilities. Just note that this kind of is all baked into kind of my logic here, and we'll talk about a little bit like rotation necessity here in a little bit. On the right hand side, I got Heated Split Shot followed by Heated Slug Shot and Clean Shot. These are all upgraded abilities, and the macros themselves again handle that for you. You also see the Gauss Round and Ricochet right here, these abilities being off the global cooldown. Then Reassemble, Drill, and Air Anchor, which is an upgrade from Heat Shot. But just note that Reassemble is a beautiful ability to pair with Drill and Air Anchor, so just kind of make sure that you usually try to line up these windows as best as possible. It's not always going to be 1-to-1, but it is still a beautiful, beautiful thing. Then over here on the right hand side, you'll see I have Tincture of Dexterity and an X Potion, especially if you're doing any kind of deep dungeon dives. You'll see Barrel Stabilizer, Bioblaster, Flamethrower, and then your Automation Queen, which is an upgrade from the Rook there for you. Now moving over into the expanded crosshotbar, this is where most of the cross roll stuff ends up being, but you'll see Tactician down here on the bottom side. Head Graze, Second Wind, Queen Overdrive if you need to have them finish off their abilities before like anything dies there. Arm's Length, Leg Graze, Peloton, and Foot Graze. Same thing over here, just a couple of different changes. Leg Graze, Head Graze, Foot Graze, Arm's Length, Chainsaw, Tactician, Bioblaster, and then Second Wind. A lot of this is in duplicate, and you can always feel free to play around with how that actually works out together. To kind of put this in to perspective, basic single kind of target rotation. I can do all my different attacks, pairing my reassembles with my different anchors, and then trying to keep these things somewhat off a cooldown with the Ricochet and the Gauss Round so that I can continue to bring out that various damage. Now once I can get this built up with Hypercharge, if it's an AoE, I like to use auto crossbow. If it's a single target, I like to use the heated Heat Blast, but I like to pair that with Wildfire. So see here, poop, boop, and then because of how it ends up being so much faster, I can easily do these things together. And you'll see how this also reduces the cooldown of Gauss Round, and then the Wildfire can go off, dealing lots of damage. So overall, like, this feels as a job. It gives me a lot of mobility. It gives me the ability to get in and out of all my different skills and then be able to put out enough damage as possible. I like the range that it gives me, and I like the variability, especially when it comes down to reducing overall party damage with Tactician. And then you now also have an additional focus with Dismantle because you can reduce the incoming damage as well. So it is a really, honestly, I've really enjoyed the changes that they've made to Machinist, and hopefully you guys do as well. But that's going to wrap it up for this section of the video. Let's go ahead and talk about kind of my UI, my logic there. And yeah, if you got any questions, sound off below. All right, so for the UI, let's go ahead and go into my HUD layout. The basics are hopefully here. If you've seen any of my other guides, it makes sense. But I have my heat gauge listed here, my parameter bar, my crosshotbar, and then essentially action help, and all that feels pretty natural. You'll see my enemy list listed over here on the left-hand side. That's just a good way of seeing what's all going on. My various different party list on the right-hand side, and a couple different things like the experience bar and the target bar and the focus target bar up here. So the main target bar is going to be here, focus target is going to be here. You can play around with the different sizes, and then any of the things, like when it comes to status, click on the UI elements and you have so much control of putting it all in one bar or breaking it out into multiple bars. So lots of things to kind of play around with. This also makes it easier to change the sizing of the different windows, but I like to press down on the R3 button to get that actually moving and going. Now, one thing I did touch on is about movement, is that with the movement macro being bound to R3, if I press it out in the open field, it will allow me to draw out a mount, which is great. Now, if I press it again, it will dismount. If I'm needing to run or do a sprint, all I do is jump, because it uses fail through, so it knows like, hey, he wants to sprint. If I was trying to sprint and do the mount, it's going to interrupt, because obviously I'm not standing still. If you're somewhere where the mount cannot be drawn, it will automatically use it as a sprint, and if you're in PvP, it will also use a sprint PvP action as well. So it actually is pretty smart, outside of the fact that you do have to do the jump out in the open world. Otherwise, you can still have it do your various different mounts, and you can have it call a specific mount, or you can have it call a random mount as well. Now, the last thing I'll touch on is essentially when it comes down to the gear. The community has crafted me this beautiful set of 610 gear, and so you can see that is what I'm currently rocking. I'm not much of a glamour person, so when it comes down to it, if you guys are wondering, this is what this set looks like. And in all, I think it kind of functions really great. So again, thank you guys so much for the support. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully you got something good out of it. If you feel like it earns it, hit that like button. Check out my other content on the channel. I talk about MMOs, video games, and all kinds of things going on in the gaming world. And yeah, I wish you guys all the best. Thank you so much, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. But until then, take care.